Thanks, everybody. So as mentioned, I work on our site optimization team at Orbit, so we'll take marketing data or the color of a button and switch it on any individual page, and then track every single user we have, conversion and interaction rate and hair color and which side of the bed they sleep on, and figure out what we need to roll out long-term to any individual team, right? But when Nathan reached out to me to speak here, I wasn't on that team. I was building just individual products for our hotel group. So I was just making our mobile hotel search result card look pretty at the time. And so as much as I wanted to speak about this, I knew that at least at Orbitz, right, we weren't working in a responsive way yet. And it got me thinking more that as much as the how-to is really important and exciting to me as an engineer, the why-to is so much more important to organizations. And so that's what this talk is. This is more why we should be building more responsively for our devices rather than the how to just go through D3 in Python and make these things. Because right, we have a lot of this data, and either people want to see it or we want people to want to see it. So I want to start the story by talking about the 90s, right? The golden age of sitcoms and the Segway prototype, and this invention that actually started in the 70s, but really gained a foothold, and I'm sure affects all of us every single day in our businesses. What am I talking about here? Yes, moon shoes. And moon shoes were invented by a company called Pinwheel in 1977. But by the 90s, they kind of had their own marketing channel because Pinwheel had turned into a TV station called Nickelodeon, right? So they could advertise for free. So while all of us were on our moon shoes, this other thing was being invented in Champaign, Illinois, called what you were probably thinking of, the internet. And specifically Mosaic, which was the first graphical internet browser. And so let's call this end of 1994, Mosaic turns into Netscape, and the entire world can now get online, right? And so if 1995, this is a real video, it's on YouTube by the way, if by 1995 was the first full year that individuals could get online, right? PC sales were phenomenally good. There were 59 million units that year. We move on to 1996, I was on a case, and that jumps up to mid 70 millions. So if we start to chart this out, we see those first 2 years are pretty darn good. And it grows in a similar fashion, and the entire industry is built on this, right? It's making money off of this huge, booming internet thing. And then in 2000, there's a bubble burst, right? And it stays flat for a year, and we think this is all going to die. But it jumps right back up. Nothing goes wrong for more than a year. And in 2007, we get this mobile thing, right? The iPhone comes out, and it changes the way we interact with the internet. And it has a couple of good years. And then it has some really good years. And in 2011, it actually overtakes desktop traffic. And last year, 1.2 billion mobile devices were sold in 1 year. So it's clearly an important thing, right? And what that means is that this isn't our internet anymore. In fact, more than 50% of US adults own smartphones. And if that's 18 to 29-year-olds, it's 75%. But this isn't our internet either, because 30 million adults use mobile as their primary internet. And more than 40% of US adults of means have tablet devices. So this year, in this coming calendar year, mobile traffic, and maybe for some of you it's already happened, but mobile traffic is going to completely overtake desktop traffic. So the internet actually looks like this, right? It's 2 iPhones and an iPad. And we get this mobile web thing. So as organizations, where are we? Maybe we don't have a mobile experience right now. Maybe we've got some political or technical debt that doesn't allow us to optimize for mobile. We have a link to an app, and apps are great, right? They're targeted specifically to your mobile user, but they're heavy, they're a total other development effort. Or you have a separate site for mobile and desktop, or a year ago, your organization decided you should do 3 of these. Fine. Maybe you have something like this, and this is from WTF Mobile Web, which is a Tumblr that just has terrible, terrible mobile experiences. So you can see you're on a phone and CNN claims you have private browsing enabled, or you're on X and it has a video about how to use their website, or you're on American Airlines and they say you have to go to their full HTML site as if this one was built in some other language. Spoiler, it wasn't. But let's say you've got the best of these bad situations right now, and you built a separate mobile site. That's probably a recent effort because, right, you've had 20 years to build a desktop site and 6 or 7 to build a mobile one, and probably only 4 or 5 that it would have mattered to you. So it's got better technology than your desktop site. And it's targeted specifically to mobile, right? You've made all of this stuff look and act very, very nicely on a smaller device, one smaller device. And it doesn't have the overhead of your desktop site. But what are you actually getting out of this? We have to have a totally separate domain, development, content, and design, because you're restarting this, right? You're building this from scratch next to your desktop site, which means you're not helping that at all. And as much as mobile is going to hit 50%, that still means 50% is still desktop, which means this is happening, right? And if you're building for mobile, maybe you picked one or two of these devices, but this is the world we're in, right? And so Nick brought it up so well that we have this responsive design idea. And this was a phrase coined by Ethan Marcotte on A List Apart back in May 2010. And what it means is looking mobile first at your web. So rather than designing for the desktop and then pulling things off until you get to this mobile experience, starting from the mobile experience and using some JavaScript or grids and growing your website to fit the features and the screen size that you have. And then enhancing it with CSS, with JavaScript, with images being loaded after to keep it quick and to keep it targeted to your very base user and making it that much better for your more enabled users. So what do you get out of this? Well, the domain development, content, and design, that all goes away because you've got one site. You're working on one thing all the time and there's feature parity across your entire work. You can adapt it to any device because you're building not just for one mobile and one desktop, you're building for all of the everythings. So it's faster because you're building for someone on 3G, which means if someone's plugged into an Ethernet cable, it's going to be 1 billion times faster, which then means this. So why would you not do it? Well, yes, redesigns are expensive. And apart from about taking 8 years, the average website design lasts about 3 years. That's across all industries. So you're doing it anyway, right? And if you can do it only once the next time instead of 3 times, you're saving that much effort. Or you could say your site is too complex, right? You have a web app instead of a website, which all of us would claim to say and then struggle to define. But people have done it, right? A lot of people have done it pretty well. And it turns out there's actual numbers behind how important this is. In 2011, so 1 year after responsive design was coined and 4 years after mobile became anything, 14% of all US holiday shopping was done on a mobile device. 2012, that jumped up to 30%. And last year, it hit 50% already. But so I was at an event apart a month ago in Chicago. And while I was sitting there learning more about mobile design, a Shopify blog came out analyzing 100,000 of their e-commerce sites, and they found that they've already crossed the 50% mark. So now more than half of all of their e-commerce is happening on mobile devices. But I'm not here to talk about web design, right? We have data. We have a lot of data, and as I said it before, we either want people to see it or they want to see it. So where are we now? Well, it could be the same. We could have no mobile experience. It could be the loading animation that takes forever and never happens, or the image fails, or you've got some library that doesn't work on whatever phone. That might be where you are. Maybe it works in the app, right? Google Analytics released a gorgeous mobile app a month and a half ago, and totally ignored the fact that their site doesn't work on mobile even a little bit. Or it shows up huge or tiny, right? You have it working in this nice container, it's an image or an applet, or you have it pulled in and you just didn't respond. And so it ends up looking like this, right? You see some of the screen, or you see a bunch of really cutesy things that look nice inside a responsive site to begin with on Adweek, or it's so small that it becomes useless on mobile. And I don't think that's any better than this, right? And maybe it's not even better than this. So again, as Nick mentioned, there's this concept of responsive data visualization. And where he was talking about responding to the amount of data you have, right? I'm specifically talking about the screen sizes. And it's nothing revolutionary, right? I'm just taking the principles we've already established for web design and applying them to our visualization design because they probably should have to begin with. It somehow just was skipped, but it's part of web design. And so it's a way to think, not a way to do, right? So what is it? It's content first thought. It's looking at your data as the most important thing that you have and not just trying to make it pretty. So your visualization gets out of the way. If you only have a Google Glass, right, you want to show a ratio, not part of a pie chart that would fit on it. So the container still has to be fluid because you're living within a website, so you can't assume anything about where your data is going to live. And then the exact same progressive enhancement because you're still living on the web and you can use these things. So what do you get? Well, it's targeted to devices because you're responding to every device you have, and if it's small or if you can touch it or if it's portrait or landscape. It's dynamic because it's going to be at least a little more backed by code, which means it's also easier to update. If something goes wrong, if you're pulling in data constantly, you're going to be able to update these things. And because of that, it's way more lightweight because you've targeted this to mobile to begin with, so just like on your entire website, you're probably only pulling in a fraction of the payload you would have been if you were instead pulling in the entire data set, which means it's future-friendly because you can more easily change this as some new device comes out. Plus, hopefully, right, you're doing this anyway in the rest of your organization. Hopefully your web team is looking at a responsive design, so you might as well keep everyone in parity, and you get all those things. So reasons not to. Well, you definitely have some technical problems, right? You can't support old browsers. D3 is supported back to IE8. Maybe you're using Python and drawing some image, and that's cool. But it's not as big of a problem as maybe we're pretending it is, because we could just have a fallback as a table, as the actual numbers. And I would argue that having any information at all that you can then replace or enhance is still better than trying to load in this beautiful thing and having it fail. Right? Maybe you have political problems. Maybe it's not just the organization, but people in it. That it's too much work. That's absolutely true. It is more work than not solving the problem. People won't look at it. And this one I struggle with because I don't think we've ever had the data to prove this or disprove it. I think we have the data to prove that people can't look at it, right? Because we have not really ever tried to solve this problem, so we don't know if anyone is trying to look at these things. Or maybe you're saying your data is too complex, just like the web app thing. And a smart guy, kind of smart guy, said this: if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Right? We're just looking at numbers in the end. So if we can display this as numbers and enhance it as we have the capability, that's what we should be doing. And the one other excuse is that I'm not a developer. And that's fine. Right? You're here because you have a stake in this. You want your group, your team, your company, your agency, your studio to succeed, and you want to help with this. Plus, it's not that hard. So I didn't want to go too much into the how-to, but I want to come up with 3 sort of methodologies to handle this. So we'll be talking about thinking small, switching out your assets, and then drawing with your actual data. So thinking small is literally just building for mobile. So if your canvas is this big right now, if you're thinking just on a desktop size, think about this thing instead. And the beauty of this is that your process doesn't have to change even a little bit, because that canvas fits inside the bigger one. So although things might look a little odd on now less than 50% of your traffic, you've solved for the majority. So what about asset dependent? Well, you do the same thing, right? You start with mobile, you start with your smallest, most limited canvas, and as you have the screen space, as you have the features, you grow and you present more robust or more pretty, let's say, more marketing focused content when you can. And you can cater to different screens, you can cater to different pixels per inch, right? We have these Retina devices now. And if someone's on a TV, right, you can even solve for that, because if you're looking at a 42-inch TV and you're trying to sit on your Xbox browser, that's basically the same as looking at a phone right here. So I promise this is the only code that I'm going to show you guys. And just as an example, let's say you're using some library to dynamically generate this image of your data. We could say it's an applet or something else, but let's simplify it to it's spitting out a picture. And so this is your one that would fit right on your mobile device. This is your most basic image. And all you need to do is pull in some other image when you have the screen size. So this is used a lot in responsive web design right now to solve for higher resolution screens, so Retina screens. You just pull in a higher pixel per inch image. But nobody said that that has to be the case, right? This can just be a different image. Or maybe you're doing it this way, which is hopefully better. You're pulling in an SVG and it scales to begin with, right? So you never even have to worry about that. But you can combine these two. and say that you want it to scale to a certain point, but you still want to change it and pull in more interesting data. And this is way, way more lightweight to begin with because scalable vector graphics have surprisingly good browser support and work way, way back. So we've done the small way, we've done the heavy way that causes you to make different assets. Let's split the difference. So let's say we're using D3, right? And we want to bind this arbitrary data to the DOM and then apply transformations however we want. Well, we start with just those numbers, right? We pull in that data statically, so we have it on the page if everything fails. And then we render the information with the code. So let's say we're rendering a table and a line chart. Well, what would that look like? We have this thing, and let's say we just pulled it all in with D3. Well, there's a big screen that fits all of it, and here's a tablet that we don't care about the line graph because it's old enough and people have JavaScript disabled. And now we're on a different tablet, and we don't care about the date because we're scrolling. And now we're on a phone, and we want to scroll down, and now we're on a TV that's vertical at some conference, and it's just scrolling through on its own. And we want people to be able to touch it and look up more information. And we can do all of this incredibly cheaply because it's just markup. We're interacting with a website, not something that's contained within it in some applet, in some asset, in some Flash container if we're having this conference 10 years ago. It's just part of the website, so you can use all of the exact same techniques that responsive web design gave you. And so let's look at an example that was why I wanted to talk about this to begin with, was that when I wasn't working on a responsive website for Orbitz, I was working on one on my own. And so you'll notice a few things about this. It's a responsive website, mobile first, the assets come in asynchronously and are adaptive, the chart is run with D3, you can touch it, which is going to be hard to do on a screen like that. And we still have a plan for non-JavaScript. So this is a website called the Cocktail Guide. I had a bunch of friends over once and was trying to figure out how to make an old-fashioned and couldn't, for my life, find a mobile website that I could read. And so I just made one. And so you'll see we have an image in the background that's pulled in from somebody's Instagram after page load. We have a chart that we built with D3. And if we start growing this up, we're on a different, say, big screen now. Let's call it a tablet, and we see the touch targets get bigger. You see from the bottom you start to pull in this list of ingredients that's just what's in the chart. And then we move to a horizontal tablet, and we see all of this stuff. And really, the visualization didn't even change much. The image behind it, we pulled in a higher res one, but we're kind of showing all of the information whether or not we had that there. And then finally on the laptop, this is on my laptop screen, we didn't change the visualization a bit. We just pulled in a few more pieces of content to give more context, and it still affects the way people interact with the visualization, and it makes the information much more helpful. So that was great. I did that for me. How does this help you guys, right? I don't have the right answer for just you, right? You could be looking at device independence as a big, important goal. You could be looking at your user's state as data, or sharing it with people, or sharing it with other computers, or having all the data, all your people looking at your data, generating more data. And so I've given some techniques, but I can't say this is the right thing to do, right? Because again, it's a way to think, not a way to do. But there are a couple really important things that I can say. That this is the PC marketplace. Right, 2012 had a pretty good year for PCs, and 1.6 billion are in use, and a lot of people have them with them right now because we're technically at work, or you have them at home. And that's where you use this, and that's where you turn it on and turn it off. But mobile had a much better year. Right, in 2012, they sold as many PCs as there are in use in the entire US in 1 year. And there's double total in the world. And they take, right, if anyone was to leave right now, you would ask the person next to you to watch your laptop, and as you're walking to the bathroom, you would check your phone once or twice. Right? You always have this with you. And Luke Wroblewski is a genius of a man. He coined the term mobile first at an event apart a couple years ago. And he tweeted this last week. He said, it's one thing to write code, it's another to humanize technology so it serves a purpose in people's lives. And this is just as important for data design, right? If we can make something beautiful and gorgeous that doesn't work, who cares? And Jonathan said it nice this morning. He said it doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be clear. And I would say that clear is pretty. right? If you're on a very limited device, what you want is that data. So treat your information as the most important thing, the thing that isn't going to change, and the thing that, if everything fails, that's what people need. And treat your design as something that shows up afterwards and is much nicer, but isn't an end-all, be-all. So how can you help? Well, maybe you're a developer, right? Like me, and you just start doing this because nobody tells you not to. Maybe you're going back and you're the person who consumes all this data, and you can just start demanding that it works on your phone because that's where you're using the internet. Maybe it's your team, and you can start saying, hey, we should look into this. We should start using these practices. But this is the most important part, is that we don't know what's going to be coming next. So we need to minimize the amount of extra work it takes to adapt to these new devices. Because I lied when I said this was our whole world too. Right, these are a lot of devices, but this picture is from every responsive web design conference for the past 4 years, because it's an old picture that Lou Przybylski took. And now we have devices that seem kind of dumb, right? Or ones that make us look kind of dumb. But we've seen time and time again that if people have these devices, they're going to demand to do everything they've done on a PC or on a phone. And they're going to demand that they can do it in a comfortable way. So we have, what, 29 years of web design to unlearn, and 6 or 7 of mobile to learn, and several hundred of data design that all we did when we moved to computers is added some interaction. We need to start thinking about all the different contexts in which our users are trying to approach this data. Because things are going to keep shifting. Pinwheel turned into Nickelodeon, right? And then a couple years ago, Nickelodeon changed their name to Nick. And that has nothing to do with this conference, but it's still a thing that just came out of left field and happened. So we have to build with the adaptability to say we don't know, but we can solve these problems in a cheaper way if we embrace not knowing. Talk to me after. I have too many things to say about this. Thank you very much.